Queen Elizabeth II of Great Britain was the longest reigning monarch in British history. She celebrated 70 years on the throne in June 2022 with her Platinum Jubilee. Queen Elizabeth II became Queen on February 6, 1952, and was crowned on June 2, 1953. She was the mother of Prince Charles, heir to the throne, as well as the grandmother of Princes William and Harry. As the longest-serving monarch in British history, she tried to make her reign more modern and sensitive to a changing public while maintaining traditions associated with the crown. Queen Elizabeth II was born Princess Elizabeth Alexandra Mary on April 21, 1926, in London, to Prince Albert, Duke of York, later known as King George VI, and Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon. At the time of her birth, most people did not realize Elizabeth would someday become the Queen of Great Britain. Elizabeth, nicknamed Lilibet, got to enjoy the first decade of her life with all the privileges of being a royal without the pressures of being the heir apparent. Elizabeth's father and mother divided their time between a home in London and Royal Lodge, the family's home on the grounds of Windsor Great Park. Elizabeth and her younger sister Margaret were educated at home by tutors. Academic courses included French, mathematics and history, along with dancing, singing and art lessons. With the outbreak of World War II in 1939, Elizabeth and her sister largely stayed out of London, having been relocated to Windsor Castle. Elizabeth soon started taking on other public duties. Appointed Colonel-in-Chief of the Grenadier Guards by her father, Elizabeth made her first public appearance inspecting the troops in 1942. She also began to accompany her parents on official visits within Britain. In 1945, Elizabeth joined the Auxiliary Territorial Service to help in the war effort. She trained side by side with other British women to be an expert driver and mechanic. While her volunteer work only lasted a few months, it offered Elizabeth a glimpse into a different, non-royal world. She had another vivid experience outside of the monarchy when she and Margaret were allowed to mingle anonymously among the citizenry on Victory in Europe Day. When Elizabeth's grandfather George V died in 1936, his eldest son, Elizabeth's uncle, became King Edward VIII. Edward, however, was in love with American divorcee Wallis Simpson and had to choose between the crown and his heart. In the end, Edward chose Simpson and abdicated the crown. The event changed the course of her life, making her the heir presumptive to the British crown. Her father was crowned King George VI in 1937, taking on the name George to emphasize continuity with his father. Her mother became Queen Elizabeth. On King George's death in 1952, she became Queen Mother and her daughter became Queen Elizabeth II. Elizabeth was crowned Queen Elizabeth II on June 2, 1953, in Westminster Abbey, at the age of 25. Elizabeth assumed the responsibilities of the ruling monarch on February 6, 1952, when her father, King George VI, died. For the first time ever, the coronation ceremony was broadcast on television, allowing people from across the globe to witness the pomp and spectacle of the event. Elizabeth married her distant cousin Philip Mountbatten, a surname adopted from his mother's side, on November 20, 1947, at London's Westminster Abbey. Elizabeth first met Philip, son of Prince Andrew of Greece, when she was only 13. She was smitten with him from the start. The two kept in touch over the years and eventually fell in love. They made an unusual pair. Elizabeth was quiet and reserved while Philip was boisterous and outspoken. Her father, King George VI, was hesitant about the match because, while Mountbatten had ties to both the Danish and Greek royal families, he didn't possess great wealth and was considered by some to have a rough personality. Elizabeth and Philip wasted no time in producing an heir. Son Charles was born in 1948, the year after their wedding, and daughter Anne arrived in 1950. Elizabeth had two more children, sons Andrew and Edward, in 1960 and 1964, respectively. In 1969, she officially made Charles her successor by granting him the title of Prince of Wales. Hundreds of millions of people tuned in to see the ceremony on television. In 1981, 32-year-old Charles wed 19-year-old Diana Spencer, best known as Princess Diana, with later rumors surfacing that he was pressured into the marriage by his family. The wedding drew enormous crowds in the streets of London and millions watched the proceedings on television. Public opinion of the monarchy was especially strong at that time. Elizabeth's long and mainly peaceful reign was marked by vast changes in her people's lives, in her country's power, how Britain is viewed abroad and how the monarchy is regarded and portrayed. As a constitutional monarch, Elizabeth did not weigh in on political matters, nor did she reveal her political views. However, she confers regularly with her prime ministers. When Elizabeth became queen, post-war Britain still had a substantial empire, dominions and dependencies. However, during the 1950s and 1960s, many of these possessions achieved independence and the British Empire evolved into the Commonwealth of Nations. Elizabeth II thus made visits to other countries as head of the Commonwealth and a representative of Britain, including a groundbreaking trip to Germany in 1965. She became the first British monarch to make a state visit there in more than 5 decades. For much of her life, the Queen surrounded herself with dogs. She was especially known for her love of corgis, owning more than 30 descendants of the first corgi she received as a teenager, until the death of the final one, Willow, in 2018. Elizabeth was also a horse enthusiast who bred thoroughbreds and attended racing events for many years. Not one for the spotlight, Elizabeth liked quiet pastimes. She enjoyed reading mysteries, working on crossword puzzles and, reportedly, even watching wrestling on television. Queen Elizabeth's life was insanely lavish and, obviously, far from normal. The following is a glimpse of her lifestyle. Queen Elizabeth's main home has 78 bathrooms. One of Queen Elizabeth's tiaras contains nearly 100 rubies. Queen Elizabeth travels all around the world. It might surprise you that Queen Elizabeth doesn't get to choose where she goes on trips, though. That's up to the United Kingdom government, which makes decisions depending on how safe a potential visit would be. Queen Elizabeth's second palace has 1,000 rooms. Queen Elizabeth loved purses by the designer brand Launer. Queen Elizabeth travels by royal plane and train. Queen has several private chefs. She owns several racehorses and luxury cars. The Queen's summer home is worth over £100 million. She married her third cousin. Yes, the Queen and Prince Philip have the same great-great-grandparents, Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, who were first cousins themselves. This makes them third cousins. She was only 13 when she fell for Prince Philip. Princess Elizabeth was just a preteen when she met the dashing 18-year-old Philip Mountbatten, who was then a cadet in the British Navy. The two corresponded for several years while he was away at sea. By the time Elizabeth was 17, she knew he was the man she wanted to marry. And they were secretly engaged for 3 years. In 1946, the press spotted Philip helping the princess put on her coat at her cousin's wedding and noticed the connection between them. The couple was secretly engaged at the time, but the palace waited 3 years, until Elizabeth was 21, to make the official announcement. Her marriage to Prince Philip set a record. Elizabeth and Philip's royal love story has stood the test of the time. They've been married for a head-spinning 73 years. In 2007, Her Majesty became the first British monarch to celebrate her diamond wedding anniversary when they reached the milestone of 60 years of marriage. Philip nicknamed her after a vegetable. The Queen was affectionately known as Cabbage by her husband. She was a big Downton Abbey fan. The Queen never missed an episode of the beloved British period drama and is said to have enjoyed pointing out the series' rare historical errors to anyone who's watched it with her. She eats a surprisingly unroyal breakfast. Despite having a royal chef and a kitchen staff who could whip up whatever her heart desires, the Queen's favorite breakfast is Kellogg's Corn Flakes, which she keeps in a Tupperware container on the breakfast table during her meal. She also sips Twinings Earl Grey tea with milk, to enjoy a daily cocktail of gin and dubonnet ahead of her midday meal. She worked as a mechanic during World War II. King George VI did not want his daughter to enlist, but he eventually relented. Princess Elizabeth joined the Women's Auxiliary Territorial Service in 1945, making her the only female member of the royal family to have entered the military. The Queen has owned more than 30 Pembroke Welsh corgis during her lifetime, all of which were descendants of her first corgi, Susan. The last one, Willow, died in 2018. She told her staff she would not bring another corgi to the house due to her old age. She is the only person in the United Kingdom who's allowed to drive without a license. Her Majesty has never taken a driver's test and her cars have no license plates, but the Queen has always loved to get behind the wheel. She doesn't have a license for one simple reason: she doesn't need one. All licenses are issued in her name in the United Kingdom. She attended her first fashion show in 2018. Despite her lifetime love of fashion, the Queen only just made her first front-row appearance in 2018 during London's Fashion Week at up-and-coming designer Richard Quinn's runway show. She was seated next to fashion maven and Vogue editor-in-chief Anna Wintour. Her Majesty's chair was easy to spot. On the 8th of September with a special velvet cushion. Buckingham Palace announced that Elizabeth was under medical supervision at Balmoral Castle after doctors expressed concern. The statement read, "Following further evaluation this morning, the Queen's doctors are concerned for Her Majesty's health and have recommended she remain under medical supervision. The Queen remains comfortable and at Balmoral." Elizabeth's 4 children, along with her daughters-in-law Camilla and Sophie and grandsons William and Harry, travelled to Balmoral. Her death was confirmed that evening at 18:30. She was honoured all over the world by leaders and celebrities. Charles III, who was the longest-serving heir apparent, at the age of 73, is the oldest person to assume the throne.